Hello everyone and welcome back to the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel. It is Hayden here and I'm joined by none other than Mr. 14-0, or 14-1 in the end himself, Mr. Tom Dowling. Tom, how you going?
Yeah, good mate. What about yourself?
Very, very well, thank you. Obviously, we've just returned from Melbourne over the weekend where you went on an absolute tear to take Dash.io to the forefront of everyone's lips these past few days. It's all people have been talking about is Dash.io in the wake of Melbourne. And just a quick shout out to Ben Dodd, who obviously won the event, that you played in the final. But let's not forget about what
Yeah.
Ben did on Azuri. That's an amazing feat as well. But we are here to talk about Dash.io. But first of all, I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, let people know who you are, and maybe how you got into Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, look, I can consider myself just a regular local Sydney player. I originally found out about Flesh and Blood because I was playing other card games and just wasn't as interested. And then I saw this like amazing artwork that was on another card game. I was like, what could possibly have art that looks that good? And I looked more in a little bit of Flesh and Blood, and the gameplay actually seemed pretty exciting. Like, having like the Diablo-esque armor really appealing to me because it just adds so many other angles of attack rather than the cards that you draw from your deck. So yeah, picked up a deck, took it to my first event being a skirmish, somehow landed in the top 8, won a cold foil hero. I mean, I've just been hooked ever since. So
Yeah, I was at that skirmish. I remember your first event. You're playing Dorinthia. I remember that.
yeah, that's the one.
I was on Classic.
Nick Butcher. Nick Butcher was my second round opponent, and there was no mercy there. I lost completely.
This tracks. This tracks. That sounds about right. Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to start. We're going to talk about Dash.io obviously and the deck list that you bought for the weekend because everyone wants to know how. First of all, you went on a historical 14-0 run, but also why it was you. I think you were one of only four, I think, Dash.io
Yeah,
players.
one of only four.
Yeah,
One of only
two,
four.
two in day two, and actually the other Dash.io player that made day two, I think, did fairly well at Sable from Melbourne. Also, I think
Yeah.
put up a winning record and maybe even cash. So, not the only, but the one that obviously made the finals. So I want to start first of all and ask you a little bit about kind of just why Dash.io. Like, what is so appealing or powerful about Dash.io? Like, what made you want to look at Dash.io for this new meta?
Yeah, well, Bright Lights came out and it just looked like the most of the set, they had kind of lowered the floor of the power level. But the minute that the Dash IO hero came out, it immediately had this hero text that was just, I mean, like if anyone's played Magic the Gathering, it's just Future Sight from Magic the Gathering. We've seen heroes like Chain before have a similar abilities to similar Magic cards like Necropotence, similarly powerful Magic card. That kind of effect just drew my attention immediately. So historically, I consider myself to be an aggro player. So I like playing decks like Fi, like Katsu, but none of them were really performing in this meta because Lexi was so dominant and had a lot of on-hit effects, could race you really well, could block you really well. So, the decks that I usually play just weren't performing for me in this meta. Um, so I threw together a rough Dash IO list, and the more that I looked at it, people were talking about the hero ability being like a Kano ability or something. The more that I looked at it, it was really just an extra card. And all her cards have a really aggressive rate and have go again. So immediately I was just like, this is just another aggro deck. I like aggro decks. I'll play an aggro deck.
Yeah.
The other thing that really drew me to Dash IO, or just what I was looking for in the greater Flesh and Blood hero pool in general. Dromai's had a massive rise in popularity because of the printing of Tome. That has increased the consistency that people land a Tomultai against you. I just wanted a hero that didn't really care about Tomultai as much, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good place to be in this meta. At what point were you? I mean, I think I already know the answer to this question because you were messaging us about it. But at what point were you like, yeah, this is the truth? Not only have I thrown this together, but I found kind of my way towards the list that I think is super powerful.
What do you mean? Sorry.
Like how quickly did you realize once you put together Dash Arrow that this was the truth? Like this is a very powerful thing to be doing.
Oh yeah, very, very quickly. I mean, like the it's hard to get the concept of the deck until you have it in your hands because the information that you get from looking at the top of your deck is just so much more than any other hero has ever had before. The way that you can plan your turns, her ability to get extra action points from items, it's just a completely different way to playing Flesh and Blood that we just haven't seen before. So very quickly, probably on release day, to be honest.
How hard is Dash.io to play?
The issue with Dash.io is that a lot of her turn cycles are very contextual. So the skill ceiling for her is quite high. It's not a matter of just boosting out all your attacks, hoping that your boom grenade connects. You really have to evaluate what your hand is, what the top of your deck is, what your turn cycle is looking like, how it's shaping up, depending on what you boost away and what's down the top of your deck, and how you can adjust. It's not just a simple matter. Yeah, it's not a simple matter of go wide. I've used all my cards. My opponent's on X life. I'll draw up X cards. The hero just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the deck list. We'll get into that very soon. But the one thing I love about modern day Flesh and Blood is that we have this little client called Teleshar, and we have a great website called Fabry. Shout out to Fabry, and it tracks Teleshar data. And Tom, I know you're already aware of this, so I'm going to ask you this question. But your deck over the past 3 days since being dropped on Fabry and the deck list going up has had over 400 games played on it from people variously around the world and has a sub 40% win rate. We're talking a Tech Lavosin win rate. So I guess the reason I asked you, is it a hard deck to play, is people are losing a lot with this deck. So why are people losing a lot with this deck?
Again, like it's not about the way that the deck's sideboarded. It's about the way that the deck plays. You have to get a lot of reps in with the deck to understand contextually how you treat the card that's on the top of your deck against the cards that are in your hand. Like, for instance, putting into corner case scenarios, I've had a Toma Fiendel in Arsenal. I would have used it on the next turn that I could possibly use it for. But the cards that I boosted away and the cards that I'm being shown were all either cards that weren't powerful to draw or cards that interact better with that Tomb of Fiendel, and my opponent's already blocked with 2 cards. So I can just pass the turn, draw up that powerful card, say like a High Octane, and then have an even bigger turn. I think that people are just not seeing that that is like an overarching concept of the deck. They're just looking to play out all their cards. If you're looking to play out all your cards, the deck's just not going to perform as well.
Go pick up Fi.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so true. I think honestly, like the reps on this deck are so needed. I told the story in the pod this week, Tom, but you were telling me how good this deck was, and obviously I did not listen. And I played a few games with it, and I think just again trying to play out all my cards, dismissing it pretty quickly. But once you harness that power of the top of the deck and understanding that this is not a linear aggro deck, this is a very non-linear aggro deck that wants to do different things depending on the state of your hand, depending on the state of the top of your deck, depending on how your opponent decides to play. Like I have a great experience from testing last night where I knew, so Dan was playing your deck, and I knew he had maximum velocity. Like, it was just obvious he had maximum velocity. Like, the way he played out his hand, and he went to Teklo core to get up to 3 resources to be able to play the Fender Bender, right? And I was like, he just has maximum velocity. So I decided to just, like, take the leak damage rather than block with 2 cards so the Boom Grenade goes through. And then instead of playing the maximum velocity, he just flips the Teklo core off the top of the deck and passes. Like, and I've just sat there as the opponent being like, I've just lost out on 5, so much value, 5 damage, that in this case it's like, okay, but I didn't take 6 damage, I only took 5 damage, but that maximum velocity is still coming next turn. So yeah, the way the deck plays is just so unique. I think we just haven't seen anything like it because of this future sight ability, because of this hero ability that Dash.io has, and the flexibility to how it can play out turns and know what it can do next turn based on what's on top of the deck. Because not only do you play the item off the top of the deck that you knew about, but then you get to see the next card under that to inform your decision for how you want to go forward. So yeah, just insane. Very, very cool hero. I want to move on to the deck list and talk a little bit about some of your choices and why why you had success with this, but maybe some people kind of dismiss this early. I know we talked about kind of play patterns and difficulty, but there's also some deck building decisions that you put in that others weren't on, others hadn't quite got to. So I'm going to bring up the deck list now, which people will be able to see on in front of us, Tom, and just talk through the deck list a little bit and some of the key cards in the deck, or some of the cards that you played that yeah, like others just weren't on, that kind of maybe have put this to the forefront and got you to that finals.
Yeah, look, I just want to start with like the very first card. That is the most important card in this deck, and it's a 3 of. And I'm not talking about Timothy Andal is a very important card, but it's Twin Drive.
Hmm.
Twin Drive just like it's just one of the cards that is glue in the deck. So I mean, if you get to double boost, then you're pulse waving for 3. You only need 2 boost attacks to play a maximum velocity. You get 2 action points off High Octane. You get to clear a Tomb of Fiandel off the top of your deck and still keep going. It just does everything. I mean, like some people were on 2, some people were on 0. There's just no. I think I've made an argument. I think I presented an argument that states it just should be 3 copies. That's it.
Yep, on board. What about any other cards that are really key to the deck? And kind of, like for me, the power cards do seem like the maximum velocities, the twin drives, the high octanes, and then another new card, backup protocol. Like that seems like that card is so flexible and can be whatever you need it to be in certain situations.
Yeah, so backup protocol, obviously really important too. It also forms the glue. I mean, the crank cards in general, they're just the glue of the deck, because ultimately what the optimal turn cycle is going to look like is you just want to play Tome of Fiandel and gain as much life as possible. Like that is the perfect scenario. So getting to play a crank item off top, get 2 action points, and then play Tome of Fiandel to draw cards, gain life. But I just don't think any other hero does it better than Dash.io does. So the backup protocols, the red one obviously creates redundancy on attacks. The blue one has been kind of overlooked, but if you have a blue in graveyard, then when you play it off top and grab a blue card from your graveyard, it actually replaces itself in resources. Not only does it do that, it creates an action point for you, which is also valuable. And it puts a counter on your gun, which is effectively 2 damage. So like, you could almost compare it to like a 0 for 60. Like it's a 2 for 0, but then it also creates you an action point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems pretty good.
And not only does it do that on your turn, like yeah, you can crack them on your turn. You can actually just use them for the action point and then crack it on their turn. So the use cases for this is that it gets you a card from your graveyard that you can block with, for one. It can also improve your card quality. So if you have a red backup, it can get a red attack action for your next turn. If you have a blue backup and you draw poorly, say you draw items or you draw a yellow, and the yellow just doesn't really fit your turn cycle, you can crack the blue and get a blue from your graveyard, and you're still at the same hand count. So
yeah, the value on it. So what are your general targets with? I mean, you talked a little about blue there. What are your general targets with red then? Like, what do you find yourself during the event this weekend? What were you going to a lot? Like in my eyes, I'm like, 6 maximum velocities, but I feel like that feels a little bit simplistic.
Yeah, no. So they were just fetching the cards that would best glue together the turn. If I had ample resources, then it's going to get the best attack action in graveyard. So whether it be like a throttle, a heist, a twin drive, maximum velocity, whatever fits the turn cycle best is what it's getting. Most of the time, though, you don't have a Teklo core out. Your hand is pretty tight on resources. It's okay just to get like a red 0 to 60 or a red T-bone and call it a day.
How important is, previously Dash decks, Dash Inventor Extraordinaire and aggressive Dash decks have struggled with the fact that they have no one hits. They're trying to get cards in like Combustible Courier to have this, pretty, minimal realistically on hit. Whereas in this deck, between Boom Grenades, between Heist, which is another very powerful card, you have a lot more on-hit effects than previous decks. How important is that to Dash.io as an aggressive deck and forcing your opponent to interact with you?
It's so important. I mean, like it creates a race scenario with the decks that are trying to be faster than you. Because when you play 1 for 4, like a red Boom Grenade, it's a 1 for 4 off the top of your deck that creates an action point. So It's actually a 1 for 6 if you consider the gun. It makes aggressive decks very hard to race you. And against slower decks, it means that they have to block you out, which softens the blow of their disruption. So yeah, very important.
Yeah. Okay. Some of the cards I want to ask you a little bit about, kind of just close off, and a card that I was watching one of your matches, and a card that seemed to perform very, very well was Conviction Amplifier, and not a card that I think other people had in their list. Can you talk a little bit about, what that card kind of does, and is it a card that has been working for you?
Yeah, so Convection Amplifier was great for me up until the finals, where I just didn't manage to get it from my deck in time. Well, that's fine. You live with the variance. It just creates awkward situations for the slower decks where you have a boom grenade set up, or your turn's leaning into a maximum velocity turn, and there's nothing that they can do to stop that damage. So the particular use case for that card is specifically against Dromai, where you're playing Goliath Gauntlet. You crack Goliath Gauntlet to give Heist +2, then you give it Dominate, and this is all based on the information that you have about your opponent. Like if you think they have a defense reaction in Arsenal, this is a pretty poor play. But if you have all the information, like if you're feeling what your opponent's doing, you have all the information, a dominated 7-power go again that has an on hit is usually pretty damaging. So yeah, just great all weekend.
Yeah. Sometimes 2 on hits, right? Boom grenade plus threatening to get back something from banish.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Ice has been very impressive to me so far in the few games I've played. A couple more cards quickly. Dissolving Shield. When and why are you playing Dissolving Shield?
So Dissolving Shields for, again, the disruptive decks. It's great for stopping, say, like Kadachi. It's great for stopping Spider's Bite. It can be used as a versatile blocking tool. So say like, protection against crush effects, protection against arrows from Azalea. And on top of that, it's just cheap to play. Like imagine if any other hero had a 3-block that they can just play out in front of them as if it was an Arsenal card and then just pass the turn. Like you're basically going into a 6-card hand.
Yeah. And the flexibility is also there if you need it to be, right? With the crank aspect of it.
Yeah, correct.
Last one I want to ask about is the 1-of penetration script. Like your deck is full of 3-ofs, and then obviously we have this 1-of conviction amplifier and this 1-of penetration script. We talked about amplifier. What about pen script? Is it good?
Pen script, I found it was reasonable all weekend. It has very niche use cases though, so it's very good into Dromai in that it lets your 5-power attacks go to 6-power for blocks.
Mm-hmm.
It's not attacking cards. It's just period attack actions. So yeah, very good in that situation. And it also just pitches for yellow. So the reason that that is important is that it fixes your ratios when you board it in.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Love it. Yeah, I found out about pen script the hard way when I definitely got popped by a red zipper hit with it in play. Love that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about kind of playing the deck out. And one of the things that people talked about kind of for you over the weekend was your sideboard, or rather your kind of like dynamic sideboard and how many cards you played. It seemed that you didn't tend to play any particular number of cards in any particular matchup. Do you want to talk maybe briefly about how you decide how you sideboard with this deck and why you play the number that you do? Do you play 60? Do you play more than 60? What's the kind of go?
For this tournament, I was generally going into it knowing that most people would have a lack of information on Dash.io and the ways and strategies to combat her. So when I found myself against a deck that was I knew that it was going to be just a racing situation. That's it. Particularly against the Lexi decks, that I had the gut feeling that they just weren't going to board out Rain Razor because Rain Razor doesn't block. My boom grenades deal damage. They can't fatigue me if they have Rain Razor on their deck. So if it was a pure racing situation, I would board in a neat 60 cards because I just knew that whoever I was versing just wouldn't be able to fatigue me. That's it. Against anybody else that had a little bit more information on what I was doing, or thinking about their ratios, they might have a lot of 3 blocks. I would board in above 60 cards. Simply just play everything that's kind of relevant and forms the right ratios in blue of the deck, and not really play the items that aren't relevant for that matchup.
Hmm. Okay. So a little bit like limited in a way, the new limited format. Look at what's in front of you in terms of your opponent, the hero, and then
Yeah.
decide, am I going to play all of the good cards in my deck in this matchup, or am I going to play most of the good cards in my deck in this matchup, basically?
Yeah. So for instance, I think it was 2 of my Lexi opponents I played 60 cards against. My other 2 Lexi opponents I played 68 cards.
Yep.
And it's all just a matter of opinion on what do you think your opponent is going to sideboard into.
Yeah, you sat down against across from Michael Fing. You had the soul read, and then you boarded up.
I just didn't know what their testing was like.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether they found the hero, whether they thought that it was good, what their impression was on it. It's much safer in that instance to just play 68 cards, because I know for a fact I've seen them on, various streaming channels at tournaments, and they've done stuff like boarding out rain raisers for the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So if they have that kind of mentality, I thought, maybe they have the same mentality for this kind of situation.
Yeah. Great. Dynamic thinking, just like the hero. Dynamic, right? I want to kind of move off the deck list a little bit, because I think it's a really clean list. But I want to ask you, if share some tips. If someone out there is going to pick this deck up this weekend, maybe they're off to an armory or to maybe one of the battle hardens around the world, they're going to pick this deck up. What are like your top kind of 2 or 3 tips for them picking up this deck? Like if I want to get started on Dash.io and pick up your list this weekend and maybe bump up that Talishar win rate, right? What are some tips to do so?
Yeah, so the first thing I say is, everyone loves Talishar. I'm just going to say, don't play it on Talishar. It's just not going to teach you the deck. My best advice is picking up the physical cards, whether that be the actual cards or you just print out proxies and make do. You just need the deck in hand to look at the turn cycles, understand the information that the deck is providing you from the top card of your deck, because that is a lot of information. Yeah, and just reps, just a lot of reps. One thing I would say is that a good way to level up your skill expression of the deck is understanding the number of different times in per turn cycle where you can change or manipulate the top card of your deck. Because that means that if you're able to change the top card of your deck 3 to 5 times a turn, the probability, ratios wise, is that you'll hit an item. So basically that means that you get an extra card for that turn, period. So yeah, a lot of the skill expressions just manipulating the top of the deck, whether that be boosting with Spark of Genius, with Heart, even with Tome. So if you're looking to play Tome, you can go down to 0 action points. Just make sure to look at the top of your deck first before popping Achilles, because there might be an item there and then you can keep going.
Yep. Okay. Great tips. Yeah. I think, like you say, right, it's super dynamic and it's no one size fits all approach to a turn. And each look at the top of your deck can completely change how you could operate the turn, right? So a lot of information to go through. Let's kind of, I guess, wrap up a little bit in terms of Lexi has hit Living Legend. Obviously, Lexi was kind of the deck to beat over this meta, and I think you beat every, well, you only lost 1 game, didn't you? So you beat every Lexi you played this weekend, including the likes of Pro Tour champion Michael Feng. But Lexi is leaving. What would you change with Lexi leaving? Is the cards? Do we need the T-Bones and the Magnetic Shockwaves, for instance? Like as Lexi leaves, like what would you potentially change about this list moving forward with Lexi leaving the meta?
Yeah, I'll definitely cut the Magnetic Shockwaves. For what blue, I'm not really sure. Obviously Blue Throral is a very good initial impression go-to. The red T-Bones, though, I think that they actually form a portion of the glue of the deck. And the reason that I say that is the reds and the blues, they really, as soon as your opponent sees one, they're kind of pressured to keep their 0 block equipment around, which means they don't really get the value from Snapdragon Scalers or, say, like Bullseye Braces. They have to keep that on the board. So that really slows down the velocity of some of your matchups. So I can definitely see the value of keeping those cards around.
Yeah, yeah. Also, T-bone makes it super awkward for your opponent to use their equipment efficiently. Like if you play like
Yeah.
two T-bone in a turn or something, now all of a sudden they've chucked a one block on your T-bone, but you've got a boom grenade in place. So are you taking the damage, or are you also throwing a card at it and effectively getting no value out of the equipment? I was quite surprised by how good T-bone is in those situations with boom grenade turns, with it but being not at breakpoint, which I would usually think makes it worse.
And I mean, like, we're even going into a meta where potentially disruptive decks like Bravo are going to see more play. Bravo is currently on the warpath of playing, 8 to 10 block equipment, but none of them have 0 blocks. So T-Bone in itself, even the blue, creates so much value that it's pretty hard to dismiss against decks like that.
Makes sense. Okay. Well, Tom, I want to, I guess, pass over to you to say any last things about Dash.io. And I think the exciting thing is, a bit of just storytelling on this end is that 14-0 run, make it to the finals of the Calling. You locked up a PCI. You're also qualified for LA next year, which you're going to be at. But you then decided yesterday, you've booked today, you're going to be at Worlds. So it's been a whirlwind kind of 72 hours for you. So just I want to say another massive congratulations, but also pass over to you for anything else that you want to add onto this awesome deck tech before we kind of take it out.
Yeah, I just want to say, first of all, thanks for everyone that watched the coverage and for all the kind messages that I've got. Really appreciate, everybody. This is a great Flesh and Blood community. What I do want to say is that, if you want to level up, you want to get better at the game, I highly recommend just attending your local armory, because there was a period in which I didn't do that. I was just attending weekend events, seasonal. I'd play maybe like 10 events a year and that'd be me. But I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. So I made a pact with some of the local scene to go on a weekly basis. And, I have to say that just getting out there, speaking with people, it really refines your skills. So yeah, get out to your local armory, refine the skills. The only way that you're going to get better at this deck is just get reps with it.
Love it. Cool. All right. Thanks, Tom, so much for being, coming and joining me on Arsenal Pass. It's great to finally have you on the channel. And until next time, we'll see everyone in the next video.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.